Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome game that took place a few minutes ago. I wasn't really planning on doing any more videos today, but then this game was brought to my attention by an excellent subscriber, Sam Rerich, so thank you for that. It was played in a simultaneous exhibition Anish Giri held. It was an exhibition for the winners of the Optiver Warwick tournaments, and he faced 5 opponents here, and this is one of those games. As usual, Giri is white in all of the games, and players get 10 minutes plus 10 seconds increment. So it's a sort of a rapid game, but Giri does get the extra 40 minutes because he has to play on all of the boards, and he of course is losing time regardless of which board he is currently facing. So it's a really nice game, really strong game. I do not know who the gentleman he's facing is. He goes by the name of the Simpsons Nerd 42 on Lichess, and he doesn't have any additional info on him, but he's rated at least on Lichess around, I think, somewhere 2200. So without further ado, let's check it out and let's see what happened here. So Giri has the white pieces as he does on all boards and opens the game with e4. We have e5 by, I don't know how to refer, let's refer to him as the nerd. So Mr. Nerd goes e5, we have knight to f3, knight to c6 and bishop to b5. Giri opts for the Ruy Lopez, we have a6, Morphy's defense, and the bishop to a4. Knight to f6, black continues development, and here we have castles, and this is a very standard idea. Interestingly, I did find one game in 2004 where king to f1 was played, also documented in the database, but it was an online event, so I imagine this was a mouse slip. So here, castles by Giri and bishop to e7, just continuing development. We have d3, Giri goes for the Martinez variation of the Ruy Lopez, and now b5, attacking the bishop, bishop to b3 and d6. So both players playing very strong and both very backed by theory. We have a3. And here comes castles by black. We have knight to c3, so again, both players just continuing development, and bishop to g4. Makes sense. d3 was played, bishop is here, so it does make sense to pin this knight. We have bishop to e3 by Giri, and now knight to d4, putting pressure on the knight here, and if you don't want to mess up your pawn structure in front of your king, you absolutely have to capture this knight. So bishop captures, e captures, and now knight to d5. And this position has been reached a lot of times in games of all levels. In top tier games, it was also reached a lot of times. I will just mention some of the games it was played in. For example, Anish Giri had it against Ding Liren in 2018 in Shenzhen. They drew that game. Maxime Vachier-Lagrave had it twice against Levon Aronian in the FIDE World Cup in Tbilisi in 2017. Caruana had it against Aronian in the London Chess Classic of 2017. But also interestingly, Giri himself had it against the Ding. Yeah, okay, I already mentioned that. But it was probably the game that Mr. Nerd here was going for when he was going for this line, as he prepared something different. So here, in all of the games, well, not in all of them, but c5 is a known move in top tier games, and also knight captures on d5. But here c6 was played, and this is a rather strange move, and Giri here goes for knight to f4. And already, it's hard to say if Giri was surprised here, because this move is known to theory, and it's hard to pick one grandmaster that's better prepared than Anish Giri here. But h3 seems to be the way to go here. For example, h3, and now we trade everything off. Captures, first knight captures with check, bishop captures, and then queen captures. So this is what should kind of should be played. White is a little bit better here. Black has a messed up pawn structure, and white will always have the advantage. But here, Giri played for a different variation. He played knight to f4, and now now it gets really interesting. Here, you should go d5. This position has been reached before, and d5 was played in all of the games. But here, instead, Giri goes for knight to h5. And now, what do you play here? Black goes for knight to h5. So what do you play here? The knight is under attack. Obviously, if you capture this knight with knight captures on h5, bishop captures, and then this pin remains here. So it's very unpleasant for white. So Giri, instead, after this knight h5 move, goes h3, and he forces a favorable trade. knight captures on f4, and now h captures on g4. And he messed up his pawn structure a little bit, but he has a very, very interesting plan. He has a beautiful bishop here cutting across this entire diagonal. He wants to play g3, kick away this knight, play king g2, and then use the h file for the rooks to attack the black king. So here c5, preparing at some point to push c4. First we're going to have to defend the c4 square one more time, most likely with rook to c8. And now Giri kicks away the knight. We have g3, and now knight back to g6. Knight to e6 also playable. Black prefers knight to g4. Knight h3 check doesn't really do anything, just king here, and the knight is really in a tough spot. If you go back with knight to g5, just knight captures, bishop captures, and now f4, and this is just terrible for black. Those pawns are incredibly strong, and the rooks will just be doubled up on the h file, and so on. So here instead, after g3, like we said, knight goes back to g6, and now we have king to g2. So ready to bring the rooks over to the h file. Queen to d7, now attacking the g4 pawn. Of course, Giri not about to allow this, goes knight to h2. He defends the g4 pawn. We have rook to c8, now preparing this c4 idea, and now Giri, of course, plays bishop to d5. He doesn't want to weaken his bishop and allow c4 to get the bishop trapped. So here, rook f to e8, and again, it's hard to find an active move for black here, but for example, bishop to d8 could be played, but it's a very, very ugly move to have to play. But it still keeps an eye on the g5 square, which is kind of a big deal. But here, rook f to e8 was played, and now Giri just continues with his plan. Rook to h1, that's not an h1. Rook to h1, and here we have bishop to f8. It's an ugly square, but at least now the rook gains access to the e file. Maybe you can play rook to e5. Maybe this can prevent the queen from reaching h5 at some point. It's all very interesting, but it's still, for example, bishop to d8 still keeps an eye on the g5 square. But after g5, white can still play this. If bishop captures, you're just gonna bring the queen to h5, and now this is being threatened as the rook is here, and also the bishop is threatened. So it's just a very, very ugly position. If bishop h6 blocking this, then just knight g4 again goes after the bishop. And if you go for some tricky lines, for example, bishop f4, trying to get a nice fork here, white will just ignore you. Just the knight to g4, put pressure here, and that's very, very hard to defend, if at all possible. You can never play h6 to prevent queen captures on h7, because, well, the bishop is still here, just queen captures on g6, and white has a winning advantage. That's all very interesting. After rook to h1, bishop to f8 was played instead, and now Giri just continues. Of course, he needs to make way for his queen to reach the h5 square. g5 was played, and now knight to e7, trying to eliminate one of the attackers here. And here, if this was a very, very serious game, Giri would of course move the bishop. You do not want to allow this capture, but now for the moment you will have to trap your own bishop here on a2, but it's not a problem, because after queen to h5, this is not very strong. At some point you will be able to break it, and then you can continue playing knight to g4, maybe double up rooks on the h file, and so on. However, here after knight to e7, Giri does not move the bishop, rather he jumps in the attack immediately with queen to h7, and now he asks black, what do you want to do? And here black should most definitely capture the bishop, and the game continues. We're going to have knight g4, threatening checkmate, and after this is defended, only then would Anish grab the knight on d5, and we have this position where white is definitely better, and you know, good things are probably going to happen. However, after Giri's queen to h5, black did not capture the bishop. Mr. Nerd went for g6, and here, this simply does not work for black. Here white has a really, really strong move, which I'm pretty sure you know what it is, but just in case, feel free to pause the video here and win the game for Anish while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the idea. As we did mention in the beginning, that this whole thing was kind of about the queen sacrifice, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course queen captures on h7. And well, it seems like it's hard to really pinpoint what's going on. it's actually really crushing. So king captures queen is the only move here, and now of course knight to g4 with a discovered check. And here black played king to g7, and he allowed Giri a very swift victory, because now there is no defense. I will, however, show what happens if black goes for the absolute best defense, and that's bishop to h5, trying to give up even more material, but at least you free up some squares for your king. But it's still winning for white, but it's very interesting, so I'm going to show it. Rook captures with check, king g7, and now knight to f6, threatening, of course, rook h7 check, king f8, and rook captures on f7 checkmate. So here, it doesn't really matter what you play. You could go for, if you try to save your queen with queen to d8, that obviously doesn't work. It's just mate in 2, like we mentioned, rook h7 check, king f8, and rook captures here with checkmate. So you would have to offer the queen back. You'd have to go for knight captures on d5, and only now do we capture the queen, but not just yet. First rook h7 for safety with check, king f8, and now we're gonna grab the queen with check. King to e7, we're gonna play e captures on d5, and after king captures on d7, it seems like the material is kind of equal because both players have both rooks, but white's position is simply too dominant. Rook captures on f7 with check, and there's just not a good move here. If you go king to d8, then you're completely cut off. The pawn prevents the king from going anywhere else. If you go here, then rook to h1 followed by rook to h7 is deadly. So you'd have to trade here, and after captures, let's say rook e1 check, and now it doesn't matter. King f7, rook to e6 is a beautiful outpost for the white rook, and black doesn't have any counterplay here. White will just play f4, bring the king into the game, and slowly but surely, have a very enjoyable game. Black doesn't even have any counterplay with this because he still has to tend to the d6 pawn with moves like rook to d8, so this is completely lost for black. But black did not find such a resilient way to continue the game. Instead, black played king to g7, and now of course it's completely winning for white. Knight to f6, threatening checkmate. White's position is so strong here that if Anish wanted to, he could have just played rook to h7 check first, just for fun, to sacrifice even more material, because after this rook to h1 check, king here, we can still play, after this knight to f6 check, king here, and rook to h1, we still get the exact same threat of rook to h7 checkmate, and there's no way to defend. But Giri, of course, is obligated to finish the game as soon as possible, as you always should. So after this king to g7, he played knight to f6, and now there is no defense against the rook to h7 checkmate. His opponent probably wanted the game to last a little bit longer, maybe not to be classified as a miniature, who knows. He played queen to h3 check. Giri, of course, said thank you very much, and after knight to f5, Giri just delivered the finishing touch, and that's rook to h7 checkmate. So really awesome stuff, and it really shows you how little it takes for great positions to happen and for such a game to exist, because his opponent played extremely well up until this point that we mentioned, like sorry, let me just rewind a little bit. Right up until this point, this, like I said, this position has been reached in so many games, and especially so many top tier games, between the world elite, and he even prepared a little surprise for Giri, and then the game started to get really interesting. But he definitely came prepared for this simultaneous exhibition, and it was a very enjoyable game. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you again very much, Sam Rory, for suggesting this game. That's why it's very important to use hashtag suggestion on any social media. Like I said, this was suggested to me on Twitter. Giri won all of the games, so all of the 5 games, it's 5-0 in Giri's favor, so congratulations on that. I would like to thank Brandon Wade, Douglas Curl, and Nathan Bakujian, a mystery person, and Benjamin Frayne for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Morphy saga, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.